Okay, welcome to Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs for hearings today, March 30th. Thank you to the people watching via streaming or in the audience. Some of our members have hearings, virtual hearings in the House, so if the seats aren't inhabited, it's because people are working in another forum or somewhere else in the complex. Delegate Queen, we're going to start with you, HB 156. I see we are joined by some of the pages. Why don't we have all the pages stand up, please? Welcome. Thank you for what you're doing. And we have, I think, about 6 or 8 bills today, which will be followed by a voting session and a work session. But we will start with local governments, urban agriculture incentive zones. I also have Colby Ferguson on this. Colby, you want to come forward? Delegate Queen, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. So greetings, Chairman Penske and members of the Education, Health, Environmental Affairs Committee. Again, I'm Delegate Pam Queen, presenting HB 156, Urban Agricultural Incentive Zone Authorization. So what this bill does is it establishes urban agricultural zones to promote environmentally friendly economic development, develop green spaces in urban areas, to expand local access to fresh produce and agricultural products. The expansion of urban agriculture represents a key tool in addressing chronic inequality in food availability in urban regions while creating job opportunities in those communities. As amended, this bill establishes an advisory board and provides for incentives to create these urban agriculture areas and allows for Maryland to use USDA funds to provide incentives. Based on the Conservation Law Foundation, it outlines that there are several benefits for agriculture zones, including nutrition, health, economic, and environmental benefits for communities. And based on similar policies that we see in other states, for every dollar invested in an urban agricultural zone, it results in $6 produced in that area. So this is the first step to provide many benefits to communities in Maryland, especially communities that health food priorities are an issue, where we have the availability of healthy food is low and the median income is below our federal poverty line. And so this is a way to address some of the issues in those areas, especially as relates to having nearby supermarkets. This bill passed out of the House Environmental and Transportation Committee unanimously and off the floor with 127 to 7 vote on the House. And so we look for a similar outcome here from this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau. We're here in support of House Bill 156. I think it's a very good bill that really helps try to organize a lot of concepts that are out there in different municipalities and different counties. I know Prince George's County has a program down below the Beltway, but then there's really not much for above the Beltway, and so it's really trying to help organize to figure out the best way to do the incentive zones and make it more practical for farmers to set up shop in the urban areas and try to address some of these food deserts that we see around highly urbanized areas. And we believe this is a good start. I don't think this is the end-all, be-all, but it is the component to figure out what's needed so we can move forward to give more organized components. So with that, we support the bill.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Questions for Delegate Queen. Sen Riley.
Mr. Ferguson, which Beltway?
The 495 Beltway.
2 Beltways in the state.
695.
Well, Prince George's County, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Let me ask you a question. What prohibits a local jurisdiction from doing this now? I mean, I guess my question is, I don't know the code. Why do we need the bill to allow this to proceed? I think it's a great idea, obviously, and my county will be a beneficiary, and we have some urban farms.
So the reason why we looked at this bill is, again, as was mentioned, we see actions that are happening in pockets throughout our state. And typically, that usually happens when some of the municipalities aren't aware of the federal funds that are available to them and how to help go after them. And so sometimes setting up these sorts of legislation helps them to kind of push them into that direction.
Thank you, Delegate Green. Thank you for the bill. And I think similar, which I experienced with a
Senator
bill-
Washington?
Oh, sorry.
Lean in the mic, please.
Lean in. There we go. Thank you for the bill. So there's some places in the bill where you tell a local government they shall do some things. So I think you might want to run it by the AG's office. So we
Okay.
have to be careful. We can't tell local governments exactly what to put in. So there's just a couple of places there. So if you might want to check that out. And then it also, is there any, so you're recommending that they use federal funding? But there's no state funding in it currently.
Correct.
And it was mentioned, Prince George's was mentioned, but I don't see Prince George's in the bill. So it's not limited to Prince George's County, is it?
No. This is a statewide bill. I think what he was mentioning this, we have an example of that
Okay.
in Prince George's County that's below the Beltway. And this is
Got it.
the reason for the bill is so that we can be more uniform in our approach to providing these sort of incentives throughout the state.
Now, I know 4-H has isn't there an urban component in the 4-H club?
4-H has a program, and in Montgomery County's 4-H is a very well-developed program. They work with the University of Maryland, and they deal with agriculture issues. But again, this is more looking at setting up in municipalities the ability to bring in products to those areas, to have encourage areas to, have urban farms. So you have urban farms in some places in the Baltimore area that needs to be fully developed and supported. So this is what we're trying to do. It's not so much just bringing produce to them, but you can also grow things in the city or other areas that need it.
And my final question is, did the committee consider any environmental justice language or designations, or making sure that underserved communities impacted by climate change are impacted or affected here?
So as part of the federal conservation and innovative grant, those are some of the parameters that are going to be used to decide how much money and funds that you get. So that's sort of a federally outlined approach.
But it's not in this bill, because the state of Maryland does have an environmental justice commission.
So are you
and
suggesting what?
No, I'm
Senator?
just asking, did the committee contemplate making sure that when you consider this bill, any discussion of any language around environmental justice?
I think that would be, and certainly we can talk to folks from E&T, but that would be part of, that's implied with going after that federal grant is what I'm trying to suggest.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions and seeing no opposition, well, there are a couple individuals, but they aren't here orally, just written. That concludes the hearing. Thank you for your patience. Thank you, Delegate Queen, for joining us.
Thank you.
We're going to go to Delegate Gilchrist and Joan Malouf and Jeff Horseman. Mr. Horseman, welcome. I'm sorry. HB 884, State Conservation Land, Old Growth Forests Management.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jim Gilchrist. This is House Bill 884, Old Growth Forests. House Bill 884 protects old growth forests in state parks and wildlife management areas. Both of these areas are managed by DNR. Amendment 363427 adds in natural resources management areas. It's been called to my attention that they have a very important old-growth forest on the eastern shore right now. And I'd like to introduce Joan Malouf, who is the expert on this issue, please.
Thank you.
Ms. Malouf.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Malouf. It's nice to be here today. This bill is very simple. There are some old-growth forests. These are forests that are hundreds of years old that are on state land, and the state DNR recognize how important these old-growth forests are for biodiversity and recreation and many other reasons. There's only a total of 2,300 acres of these old-growth forests on the state land. 1,700 of those acres are already protected because they're in our state forests, and our state forests get harvested according to FSC standards, so they're protected. But what's not protected, surprisingly, is the state parks, wildlife management areas, and natural resource management areas. Now, no one's looking to cut those forests right now, but today, what we'd like to do is get this bill passed to make sure that those old forests remain there into the future and are not at threat.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Orson. Jeff?
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you. I have a personal interest in this bill. Since in 1980, as a summer intern, I cut the trails into the Schoolhouse Woods, which is the largest standing old-growth forest on the eastern shore at 14 acres. I had always thought, and I had spoken with John Griffith, the old secretary of DNR, and we always thought that old-growth forests were protected throughout Maryland. But through a complicated layer of protections, it turns out that some old-growth forest, the ones that Dr. Malouf was just talking about, are not protected. And these are the ones that are in natural resource management areas. What are the other two? Wildlife areas and state parks. So this bill is simply trying to codify the existing protections and extend them to about 400 acres of old-growth forests that are currently excluded from protection. We passed the House with 123 and 13 co-sponsors. I think it's a pretty strong bill. We look forward to a favorable on this from you all. Thank you.
Questions for the panel? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may be the last time that Delegate Gilchrist will be before us as a delegate, and I just want to publicly acknowledge his 16 years of service to the residents of District 17 in the state of Maryland. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kagan, thank you so much.
And many of you recall we visited Shorekeepers a year and a half ago, I believe, and at that point, Mr. Orson was the executive director of Shorekeepers, and we welcomed him back. And also, sorry about the passing of your mother, Jeff. So,
Thank you.
other questions, Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Delegate, thank you for the bill, and Ms. Malouf, Dr. Malouf, welcome. You had mentioned, we had a brief conversation prior to this. Was there an amendment that had worked out some of the opposition, the earlier opposition to the bill from the Forest Association and the Farm Bureau? And again, I'm just trying to catch up on this bill.
Yes, the way the bill was originally written, which I wasn't part of the original drafting, it included land in conservation easement, program open space, some MET properties. And when we got that back and read that, we thought that might be a little bit too inclusive. And originally, the Maryland Forest Association and the Farm Bureau didn't want the conservation easement land in there, but then when they saw that we had amended it out, there was no problem, no objection.
Okay, and Delegate, did you want to comment on that, on the amendment?
No, that's right. I actually haven't seen the witness list today, but I haven't heard of any opposition.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for the panel? Seeing none, thank you all. Thank you, Delegate. Nice to see you. That concludes the hearing on 884. We're going to go to HB 1216, Delegate Wells. Department of Agriculture Urban Agricultural Grant Program. Joining Delegate Wells will be Colby Ferguson and Steve McHenry from Marbidco. If you would join the delegate at the table. Welcome. Delegate.
Welcome. It's my first time in EHE.
We don't bite.
Happy to hear that. Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Committee. For the record, I am Delegate Melissa Wells, here to testify on House Bill 1216. House Bill 1216 would establish a statewide urban agriculture grant program in the Department of Agriculture to increase the viability of agribusinesses, urban farming, and improve access to urban-grown foods, in particular for those communities with a lack of access to healthy, fresh, local food sources. The fund would be a non-lapsing fund held by the state treasurer that could also receive money from another source, including the federal government. Through nonprofits, the program would focus on technical assistance, securing real property, and grants for capital improvements for urban agribusinesses. The bill requires $250,000 per year for 5 years, starting in fiscal '24. Many areas in Maryland are experiencing an increase in interest in urban agriculture, and HB 1216 seeks to support those startup producers with additional training, education, and funding, as well as support our established urban farmers, while further the state's commitment to providing equitable access to healthy food, supporting locally owned businesses, and increasing green spaces in developed areas. In support of this legislation are Maryland Farm Bureau, Marbidco, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Maryland Legislative Coalition, Plantation Park Heights Urban Farm, New Brooklyn Farms, and LifeBridge Health. In addition, this legislation has a one-time support, the governor's supplemental of $500,000, which is contingent on passage of this bill. It is with this that I request a favorable report on House Bill 1216. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson, and then Mr. McHenry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau, and we're in support of 1216, House Bill 1216, another bill that was worked on by Delegate Wells last year as just a Baltimore City bill. We saw the value of this and came to her and asked if we could expand this to a statewide bill and really cover more than just specifically what the Baltimore City's is advanced in the urban agriculture compared to other municipalities and urban areas around the state. And so we saw this was an opportunity to really address a lot of the issues or concerns that prevent, or the roadblocks that prevent urban agriculture from building and expanding in the urban areas. And so really what I like about this is that we have a lot of immigrants that move into the state that come from areas of long histories of farming. So they know how to farm, they know how to grow product, but they've never lived in the United States, they've never lived in Maryland, so they don't know what the components of what a FSMA requirements are, Food Safety Modernization Act. They don't understand what a nutrient management plan is. They don't understand what a lot of the requirements and restrictions that you have to grow and farm in Maryland. And what I like about this bill is that the technical assistance needed to make sure you know those kinds of things are being provided, so you're not just trying to go out to a farmer's market and then find out that you haven't met all the needs that you needed. So I think this is a great bill. It's a great component. I know the governor's office saw the value in it with the supplemental, and so we hope you move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good to be back. My name is Steve McHenry, Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, otherwise known as Marbidco. I think much of what I would have said has already been said. I do want to note that we have submitted a written testimony as well as a written statement in support from the Food System Resiliency Council, which has also embraced this legislation. This is an important bill. It's a bill that was worked on by a group of conservation and agricultural organizations last fall, supplemented by a work group of urban ag stakeholders from across the state. So this bill is widely supported. It's an important bill, and we would certainly ask for your favorable support. Thank you.
Questions for any of the panelists? Senator Washington.
Thank you. Thank you, Delegate Wells, for bringing this bill. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Yes, I like this. I guess I'll ask you the same question, because you're including membership from the NAACP on your bill, and are you open to some other looking at environmental justice and maybe another issues on here with regard to making sure that since it's statewide,
Absolutely.
that it's being as extensive as
Absolutely.
possible?
So Thank you for that question, Senator.
Yeah.
And that was a really big focus of how we crafted the bill and how we
Yeah.
worked together with the coalition. So that's just one that's listed, but there's some other very clear language around who should be on the review board,
Great.
including individuals that are, that have a record of working with
Low
socially
income.
disadvantaged farmers.
Yeah.
Also making sure that we have individuals that have experience working in low income census tracts as defined by the Housing and Urban Development at the federal level. So we really took the time to make sure that we are including individuals that have a track record of not only working in urban farming, but also working with, I think we targeted socially disadvantaged farmers, which is a term that is defined in the state code.
Great, great. I appreciate your care.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Further questions for the panel? Seeing none and seeing that no one has signed up in opposition with oral testimony, we thank you, Delegate. Welcome to EHE. Hopefully
Thank
you'll
you.
come back.
Absolutely. I'll be back.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you.
That
Thank you.
concludes HB 1216. We have, is it Carrie, Delegate Guyton's office? This is HB 749, Maryland Park Explorers Grant Pilot Program Establishment. We also have Rosalyn Johnson and Jessica Lees, or Lays. Is she not?
I haven't seen her.
Okay, this is on behalf of Delegate Guyton, who had to go back to the House. Please.
Dear Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. Again, my name is Corey Johns. I'm representing Delegate Michelle Guyton. We're requesting your support for HB 749, which establishes the Maryland Park Explorers Pilot Program in Baltimore County and Anne Arundel counties. According to the Sierra Club, 20 million children do not live within 10 miles of green recreational space. Prior to COVID, the American child spent less than 10 minutes a day outdoors, an average of 7 to 8 hours a day, interacting inside with electronics and sitting in front of a screen. That's before virtual schooling. The evidence of negative mental, behavioral, social, and physical health effects of this time in front of screens has been well documented. Recent analysis indicates that problems are not just associated with screen time, but actually associated with kids are not doing, going outside. HB 749 will encourage children to engage in outdoor play and exploration and fight childhood obesity by building physical, healthier children while expanding their knowledge of the environment and promoting social and behavioral health. While the benefits of environmental education are well documented for both the health of the child and health of the environment, much of the exposure is inequitable. This bill requires that these programs prioritize children in areas that lack green space and equitable outdoor access to environmental experiences, and then collect demographic data about their participants. Thank you for your time and consideration, and request a favorable report on HB 749 that establishes a county
Thank
park
you.
explorers pilot program.
Ms. Johnson.
Yes, good morning. Good afternoon. For the record, Rosalyn Johnson, Director of Recreation and, good afternoon. For the record, Rosalyn Johnson, I'm the Director of Recreation and Parks for Baltimore County, and I'm here to support HB 749 and ask that you do the same. It's the Maryland Park Explorers Grant Pilot Program. During COVID, we noticed an increase of our park usership in as much as 224% increase. We had new park users, people who had never used our parks before. And so how do you teach people who've never used your parks before? We know that children are the best teachers. When they learn something, they share it with their parents, they share it with their families. And so this bill will help get children excited about the great outdoors. It will foster and feed a love of the outdoors, and we're hopeful that that will translate to their parents. When you look around the country, when you look around the state, when you look at all the counties, my nature staff does not represent the communities we serve. We have a hard time hiring people of color, particularly for nature and the great outdoors, and we're hopeful that this will really help target and grow our future leaders as it relates to nature and the great outdoors. We know that Black and brown people have limited access to parks. And so this will foster a curiosity of parks. They'll learn how to use parks in a very different way. Sure, pick the dandelions, but leave the orchids there. They're pretty, and there's a reason why they're there. So this bill will really foster and grow our future as far as future naturalists and future enthusiasts of the great outdoors. So we ask that you support this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Sen Riley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Johns, were you involved with the preparation and the development of this bill?
Yes.
Okay. Could you share with the committee why there's been no prior introduction to the Anne Arundel County Senate delegation? When we looked at it today, no one knew what it was about.
Yeah, so originally, when it came through in the House, it was not labeled as a local bill because it establishes a pilot program that the goal is to bring it statewide. So when the bill got through the House, it was a very last-minute thing that we had to have a local hearing, and actually contacted the delegations and the committee staff to see if this was required for this. With the timing, I contacted Senator Elfreth about getting a hearing. They said they'd get back to me. I have not heard back yet.
Well, we had a hearing this morning, but nobody knew what the bill was about. $150,000 in governor funding, I think, is the fiscal note in the bill.
So it was actually, there is an amendment. It's $50,000 for each participating county. Calvert County, the amendment removed Calvert County. Calvert County just didn't feel they had the staff at this time to participate. So it actually got decreased to $100,000, but it's split between the counties that are participating.
And administered by the Department of Natural Resources?
Yes.
And did you get a letter from the Anne Arundel County House delegation yet?
Yes.
Okay.
It passed the House delegation and for both Anne Arundel County and Baltimore County.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Questions? Thank you, Senator O'Reilly. That completes the hearing on this bill. Please tell Delegate Guyton that we miss seeing her.
Thank you.
Take care, guys. Next up, we've got Delegate von Stewart with House Bill 250. We got to get you out of here back to your committee, because I understand the first bill on your committee agenda is going to be an especially good one. House Bill 250 is Private Well Safety Act of 2022. Welcome, Delegate Stewart, and also joining you is going to be Bill Castelli. Mr. Castelli, you can sit up at the table if you like. And Delegate, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Delegate von Stewart, and this is House Bill 250, the Private Well Safety Act. So this bill will provide the roughly 830,000 Marylanders who get their drinking water from private wells with the necessary resources and information that they need to monitor and safeguard their household drinking water. So the bill basically does three things. Number one, it requires MDE to provide eligible residents with financial assistance to cover the cost of well testing and remediation. How this would work is that basically counties could apply for grant money if the governor chooses to basically appropriate funds to this fund, and then the counties would run the programs with some requirements that are laid out in the bill. Secondly, the bill requires MDE to create an online database of well water test results, which would be populated by county health departments and state-certified labs. And third, and this is what Mr. Castelli, I assume, will talk mostly about, the bill requires water quality testing during the sale of a home with a well, though the buyer could waive that testing requirement. So over the interim, my office convened basically an informal work group of stakeholders to discuss and to draft this legislation. And so the group included representatives from MDE, from the Center for Progressive Reform, from Clean Water Action, MACO, septic stakeholders, water keepers, Chesapeake, you name it, and more. And so HB 250 is a result of that collaboration. You might see in your floor systems that there was initially some opposition nonetheless over on the House side, but we worked with even more stakeholders, including the realtors, to craft the compromise piece of legislation that's before us today. So as I mentioned, nearly 1 million Marylanders rely on wells for their drinking water, but water quality protections are few and far between. There was a 2020 report from the Center for Progressive Reform that basically concluded that our state provides fewer protections for private well owners than basically any other state in the country. We do require new wells to meet safety thresholds, but this policy is insufficient because obviously wells can degrade over time. And so, Maryland basically is behind. Unlike at least 12 states, Maryland does not require testing of private wells during a property transfer. Unlike at least 22 other states, we don't offer free or low-cost test kits. And unlike 40 other states, we don't maintain a public database with information about the health of private wells. And so basically, Maryland's well owners are expected to take the safety of their drinking water into their own hands, and many sadly believe that their well water is necessarily safe to drink. They don't necessarily know that they're supposed to be testing their wells annually, and many of them can't afford the cost of testing, much less remediation. And really the contaminant that we're worried most here is called nitrates. They are odorless, they're colorless, they're tasteless, and they're therefore pretty terrifying. They go unnoticed, but basically high levels of nitrates in drinking waters are linked to various cancers. And I think, as a parent to a 3-year-old, I think most terrifyingly for me, it's linked to a condition that's fatal to infants called blue baby syndrome. So in conclusion, safe drinking water is a human right, and we must ensure that all Marylanders have access to it. And this bill would take a modest but important step in that direction. And I urge a favorable report.
Delegate Stewart, Mr. Castelli.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Bill Castelli on behalf of the Maryland Realtors. And with the amendments that were added on in the House, we're supportive of the bill. There are 2 provisions of the bill that we think make a lot of sense. The first is the grant program, like the septic program, which does provide grants for improvements if you're going to a best available technology. This would provide homeowners with some assistance if they do in fact, have to undertake some remediation of that well. That can be an expensive process. So we think a grant program is important. And then finally, on the inspection at the settlement, we supported that with the language, with the amended language in the House. There are some requirements under federal loans right now that you do conduct a water test, and so that is why some of the language that we added in the House was added just to make sure that people aren't testing twice. So you had a state requirement and a federal requirement and could be waived by the buyer. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Castelli. Senator Riley has a question.
Thank you very much. Delegate, good bill. I represent Southern Anne Arundel County, and it's an issue. How do we define an eligible homeowner? If the county accepts it, how do we define an eligible homeowner? I understand point of sale, but other testing that they think needs to be done.
You mean for the grants?
Yes.
So a covered household under the bill is basically just means one or more individuals that reside at a home with a private well. Other than that, we leave it up to the county to decide how they want to disperse the funds.
Oh, so this is enabling legislation?
Correct. So, assuming the governor, and we did work with MDE, so we're hopeful that, the governor, either this governor or maybe a future governor, will appropriate funds into this fund, and then basically counties could apply for grants. We don't put a whole lot of requirements on the counties as to who's covered and who's not, other than obviously we don't want people to get money if they don't have a well.
Does the bill address how many times a well can be tested in a given year or decade?
Or
is that again at the county level?
I think it would mostly be at the county level, except for the fact that for the sale of real property, the results would be for 3 years. Yeah, you got that. So, yeah, I mean, experts say you should test your well annually. I would not expect counties to be dispersing money to people more than once a year, but otherwise we would leave it up to the counties.
So if Anne Arundel County deemed it appropriate to put a income level on the grants, that would be just part of the natural administration of the program.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think means testing probably does make sense because we're mostly concerned with folks who can't afford testing or remediation.
I agree with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Riley. Delegate Stewart, just a quick question because people could be watching and might be educated. I've never thought of a well degrading and being in worse situation. Can you just indicate what's the cost of testing a well?
So there's a test you can get on Amazon, basically the well water test that's sort of basic and tests for say 9 or 10 of the most common contaminants. I think it's something like $22.50 the last time I checked on Amazon.
$22.50.
$22.50.
And that would include the nitrates that you said are the biggest worry.
Yes, exactly. So,
great.
you know, but if you have to do it annually, it can be a cost to certain families. It's certainly, I think, anytime you have to pay even a little bit of money, I think it can be an impediment to folks. But I think it's the remediation that really can get up there, because if you do have nitrates in your well, it can be extremely costly, hundreds if not thousands of dollars to remediate.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Stewart. I see no other questions. That completes.
Just to say, I
except
assume
for
a
the chair.
degraded well could not be closed with a coal tar sealant. Is that
Mr. Chair, I think we would probably need some other experts to come in to verify. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Delegate. Good to see you.
That completes the hearing on House Bill 250.
Okay.
Back to the chair.
We're going to go with Delegate Charles, then Delegate Love, and then Delegate Aaron's for our final three bills. Welcome, Delegate Charles, on behalf of Prince George's County. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. All right. For the record, I am Delegate Nick Charles, Chairman of the Prince George's County House Delegation, here to testify on behalf of House Bill 1057. House Bill 1057 is the Prince George's County Recreation Blue Ribbon Work Group. What this does is it establishes the County Blue Ribbon Work Group to study and make recommendations to the Prince George's County Council on improving access to certain programming, facilities, and opportunities, the potential cost benefits, and advantages of transferring the responsibility for certain operations from the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission to a different entity, and how the entity could cover certain costs. This bill had been voted on by the delegation in full, so it was a favorable from the delegation. It was favorable from the entire House. And we also had many amendments that came with this bill. If you had the opportunity to see the bill, we've had amendments that we had buy-in from Maryland National Capital Park and Planning. We end up getting buy-in from the County Council. And we also, like I said, the buy-in from the entire delegation. This bill, it's a bill that means a lot to recreation and between sports and arts and everything else for Prince George's County. And we want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can for our citizens. So that I ask that you all give us a favorable report on this bill. And thank you.
Questions for the good delegate from Prince George's County? I just have one, and I don't know if this has changed. I see there is written unfavorable from Park and Planning. Have they changed their position, or are they still?
So Park and Planning offered up, I've spoken with their attorney and also with Betty Hewlett, and let them know we got all of their amendments, and every single amendment that they asked for, we have that in here. So if there is an unfavorable report from them, that's new to me, because we did everything they asked for.
Okay, well, as of whenever people signed up, there is written, I've not read it, but on my list in front of me it says unfavorable. So we can pursue that offline. Other questions? Senator Washington.
Thank you. So this is a work group.
Yes,
now.
this is a work group.
And and you're constituting the work group based on what criteria? So you've got 2 members of Prince George's County delegation.
2 members from the state senate. It's a long list of individuals, and I can read them off to you. We have 2 members appointed by the county executive as well.
I'm not sure we have the bill in front of us.
No. I was just asking some questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this the bill now? Basically, the amendments would be the bill? Is that the idea?
This is the, so we have the, I got the interdelineated copy in front of me that has all of the amendments that's been accepted into the bill. And just for an FYI also, Senator Patterson, after discussion with a couple of your colleagues in the Prince George's County Senate delegation, I was told there may be about 2 more amendments that will come to this bill as well.
Senator, it went from allowing the county government to create this new entity to that's stricken, and now it's just a study.
It's purely a study.
At the end of the study, it'll take further action. So in other words, where some people felt it was putting the cart before the horse,
Exactly.
I think the House heard that, and the county heard that. So this restricts their authority to go ahead with this proposal. Is that correct?
That is very correct.
Thank you, Delegate. Senator Patterson.
Okay. That's what
Again, the delegation has not taken it up yet. We will probably this Friday or sometime soon.
Yeah, that's what I was told, possibly Friday, that your delegation will take it up.
Further questions?
So you have the Boys and Girls Clubs, and what's the goal of this bill or this piece?
So it's not quite a short articulation of the bill, but the issue is, when you look at the Boys and Girls Clubs in Prince George's County, we are collecting over $90 million in revenue that's supposed to go towards recreation. And we have a phenomenal recreation program with park and planning, and we have phenomenal parks as well that also collects roughly over $140 million for parks through our Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Tax. What we're trying to do is make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck, because when you look at the funding that's going to the Boys and Girls Clubs within Prince George's County, the Boys and Girls Clubs are not getting a significant amount of money that can truly benefit the programming for the boys and girls within our county. And so we're looking at figuring out the best way and pathway forward to make this a beneficial bill and a beneficial program for all of the youngsters in Prince George's County, especially with crime increasing. We want to make sure we give these kids every opportunity possible to have accessibility to youth sports, to arts, to if it's painting, singing, learning instrumentation. So that's why we have so many different members of this board, so we can actually figure it out with this work group to figure out what we're missing and how to move forward.
Yeah, that's, Senator, this is a local bill, and the original idea was whether Park and Planning should handle this or do a spin-off. So I think.
No, I understand. Are you looking at Title IX, making sure that there's gender equity? Is that something that you might want to consider in terms of what boys and girls are able to do, or other children that might not fit into those categories? Is there any discussion of looking at gender?
I don't think
how
it's
that
blocking
works?
out anybody based off of the.
Yeah. No, but there's usually a sort of a history of unequal treatment, and so it might be an interesting thing to look at Title IX.
Okay.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, what's the position of the county council on this legislation?
So the county council offered a ton of amendments. We actually accepted all of the amendments. We put it into the bill. And from the last discussion I had, obviously, I don't have a letter in front of me, but we accepted all of their amendments, and I think everything is good to go from the county council. But that could contradict based off of what we just heard about Park and Planning putting out a letter.
Apparently, it was from a retired member of Park and Planning who identified herself Park and Planning.
Ah, gotcha.
So I just learned that.
Gotcha.
Okay, all right, thank you.
That concludes the hearing on this bill. Thank you, and we'll await a letter from the delegation.
All right.
Thank you, Delegate.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't see Delegate Love. We'll go to Delegate Ahrens. 546 Ken Island Drawbridge Fishing Prohibition.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for having me in the committee. Just real quickly, House Bill 546 is a pretty simple bill. It's a public safety bill. And for the record, Delegate Ahrens, Queen Anne's County. It's a simple bill. Pedestrians, it's Ken Island Drawbridge, fishing prohibition. And what the intent of this bill is if you've been to Queen Anne's County and ever traveled in the Narrows, which is an area where we have most of our restaurants, it's a highly motivated area where we have a lot of activity going on. There's a channel there that comes from the Chester River down into Prospect Bay area, and that's a very rough channel. There's a lot of current and what have you. It's very dangerous. And what we've done in the past is we've had issues with people wanting to fish off that drawbridge, and they want to go down there, and it's very unsafe. They'll come down by the ramps or the railings under the bridge, and they'll fish off the bridge itself, and it becomes very dangerous. We're not precluding fishing over there because there are areas where you're allowed to fish in that, but what we're trying to do is verify and keep them verify that everybody can be safe and that fishing will be done without any major incidents. If you go under that bridge, if you see it when the boats are coming through, sometimes a boat will go up one channel, go up another channel when the drawbridge is up, and these people are fishing off that bridge. And we have instances where people are getting hooked, boats are getting hooked, and it can be very dangerous. We haven't any major problems there. We've had people fall in there where they end up hitting here and are now a quarter mile down the way when we do finally get them out. It's a serious problem for us over there because of the volume of traffic that we see. The county commissioners just sent in a letter of support for this today. I apologize we didn't have that prior to this hearing, but it's now in the packet and you all have that. MDOT sent a letter of kind of weird. It wasn't a letter of not support, but they agreed it was a safety issue, and they went.
A letter of information, I think, is how they normally describe it.
Mr. Chairman, it was funny because I said, why can't you just say it's a safety issue, you support it? You know, but anyway, that's just the way things.
That's for another discussion. And
we could do that offline. But I'm asking for a favorable report on it. It is a good bill. It's a solid bill. It's going to help people. And it's not, like I said, it's not malicious. We do have fishing areas over there. We have it posted. We're just looking to be able to enforce it locally because when you start looking at state police, our sheriff's office, or DNR, it's sometimes difficult to get the right opportunity to try and stop this and prevent harm.
Okay, and we do have a letter from the Kent County Senate delegation supporting it.
Yes, you do. And the commissioner, sir.
Yep. Please.
Super quick, Delegate Arns, nice to see you. You presented the bill super well. Just wondering, would there be a signage so that a fisher person would be aware that they shouldn't toss a line here?
That's a great question because there's already signage there.
Okay.
And what they're doing is they're ignoring the signs and still going down there. And it does become dangerous, like you say.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Interesting.
In a review of the bill, the fiscal note specifically says money set aside for additional signage.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Delegate.
Thank you
for your
very much. Have a
patience.
great day.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, is staff member from Delegate Love's office, please join us at the table. This is 834, On-Site Sewage Disposal Systems Outreach and Education Septic Awareness Act of 2022.
Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, and honorable members of the committee. My name is Selena Raleigh, and I'm Delegate Sara Raleigh's Chief of Staff.
Ms. Raleigh, I apologize. Is Ms. Ranson and Mr. Costelli want to come up and join the good staff member to give her support? I'm sure she can handle it, but let's.
Love to have my
there's
friends by
strength in
my side,
numbers,
yes.
Of course. Okay. Please.
Thank you. My name is Selena Raleigh, and I'm Delegate Love's Chief of Staff, testifying on her behalf while she's making her way to committee, in favor of HB 834, the Septic Awareness Act of 2022. HB 834 helps to raise septic awareness by doing two things. First, it would establish Septic Smart Week in connection with the EPA's established Septic Smart Week, which falls on the third full week in September. This year's Septic Smart Week is September 19 through 23. Second, it would require that new homeowners who are buying a residence with a septic system be provided with certain materials about septic systems from the EPA. So in 2019, the House passed a Montgomery County local bill, HB 202 and HB 562. However, it's my understanding that they stalled in the Senate just due to a concern that they would result in multiple local bills. So as a result, before you today is a statewide bill. And according to MDE, approximately 2.2 million Maryland households, which is roughly 20% of Maryland households, are on septic. And in Montgomery County alone, approximately 20,000 properties are on septic. Ensuring that homeowners and home buyers are educated on proper septic usage and care is important for both homeowners and the environment. Currently, 9 states have legislatively adopted Septic Smart Week. This includes Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Dakota, North Carolina, Virginia, Washington, and Oklahoma. And states have taken a variety of clever measures to raise awareness of septic issues, some of which is listed in Delegate Love's written testimony, others you can see on the EPA's website. Personally, I want to do what New Hampshire did and take a life-size cardboard cutout of Septic Sam, whom you can see here, around the state, but a girl can dream. Increased awareness of septic system usage and care improves efficiency in water usage, proper disposal of hazardous materials, and proper care of drains to avoid costly repairs. Ultimately, HB 834 will aid in ensuring clean water and a cleaner environment for Marylanders. I'll also add that HB 834 passed third reader in the House 130-9. And with that, Delegate Love respectfully requests a favorable report on HB 834. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Ranson, Mr. Castelli, in whatever order you choose.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of a Septic Smart Week. Who doesn't want to celebrate and learn about septic systems and the most effective ways that you can maintain them? An ounce of prevention is always worth more than a pound of the cure. And septic systems, as we know, have a lot of different ways that they can fail. And proper homeowner education and maintenance of these systems is absolutely critical. And so having this fun little week, as well as this additional information provided to new homeowners, is a great tool to help institutionalize this education efforts for people, so that way they can hopefully and healthfully maintain their septic system for many years in the future. Just in my own experience, I have personally persuaded multiple people I know and love to get their septic systems pumped out or to remove trees and whatnot from their drain field, issues that could very seriously lead to failure. But not everybody has a little Emily Ranson of Clean Water Action constantly whining about septic systems and trying to encourage them to maintain them. And so having Septic Week would be a great way to spread this love. So thank you, and we urge a favorable report.
Mr. Castelli, do you want to talk about Septic Sam?
Yes, in fact, Septic Sam is also in my testimony as well. So, but we appreciate the delegate working with us to just make sure that this information is presented in a way that makes the most sense for the real estate contracts. And what will be provided is not just a description of the septic information, but a link to it. There's a lot of different resources EPA has on septic systems, and I think buyers will get as much information as they want from it.
Questions on Septic Week? Seeing none, thank you all. Give our best as a good delegate. Delegate Stein, good timing. The table or in the first row. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. This is testimony in support of House Bill 876, which would set up the Maryland Forestry Education Fund. Over the years, outreach to landowners and the public about the importance of healthy forests has been cut back. 20 years ago, DNR's Forest Service program had an outreach program that conducted seminars, school programs, and other outreach that taught folks and landowners that forests are much more than just trees. But that program was eliminated when the agency was downsized, and the Forest Service still does not have enough staff to conduct outreach and education about forests. So this bill would establish a Maryland Forestry Education Fund housed within the Maryland Forestry Foundation to bring back at least some of that outreach. Fund would provide training and education of forest landowners and local governments. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll conclude, and happy to have Mr. Allen and other witnesses provide more detail. Thank you.
Hear from the whole panel, then we'll open it up for questions. Mr. Allen, welcome back to EHE.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Gary Allen. I'm the president of the Maryland Forestry Foundation. I want to thank Delegate Stein for bringing this bill forward. And Mr. Chairman, I want to congratulate you, frankly, on your work on the climate bill that cleared the General Assembly yesterday. I mention that simply because last year we worked together on the previous edition of that bill, and a part of it passed, on the tree part of the bill passed, and the foundation's been actively involved in looking at the implementation of that particular aspect of the bill. This year we'll plant more than 88,000 trees to help address the 5 million trees goal. I mention that because the foundation was set up to work with the local district forestry boards, and you'll notice in my testimony that I've attached a letter of support from the Association of all the state's boards, as well as the last state regular forester, We currently have an acting state forester. We've had an acting state forester for about 2 years now, so this is obviously one of the most important appointments that lie ahead for the Hogan administration. We're anxious to see this bill move forward. We ask for your favorable support for it because this helps us build the capacity of local forestry boards and urban and community forestry professionals and volunteers in every community across Maryland. Thank you very much for your attention and time and support. We ask for your favorable report on this bill. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Allen, and all your work in terms of forestry. In whatever order you choose.
Sure.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Angelica Bailey with the Maryland Municipal League. First, many thanks to the sponsor for this bill, and of course to the committee for being heard today. Stewardship of our precious natural resources is a critical role of local governments, but it can get expensive, especially when forest health is concerned. So we think this fund is a very reasonable and effective tool for local governments, and we would very respectfully request a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Dominic Butchko with the Maryland Association of Counties. MACO echoes all of these sentiments. This is a good bill, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Boy, do we love that conciseness. That's great. Questions for the panel? Questions for the panel? Seeing none, thank you all. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for coming to Annapolis. Delegate Young, welcome back. 1381, firefighting training oriented strand board prohibition. We also have Jeffrey Buttle and Robert Phillips, if you'd like to join the good delegate at the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good to be back in front of you. I did not realize I had so many bills coming in front of you.
Feeling better?
Feeling much better. Still sound nasally, but feeling great. So, I'm happy to present HB 1381, firefighting training oriented strand board prohibitions on burning. So one, I know this committee is aware, as well as the General Assembly is aware. We've been doing everything we can over the past few years to make the training of our firefighters and first responders safer and easier. And this is another attempt to do so by prohibiting the burning and use of strand board in training for training purposes and for potential burning. We had a few folks that were in opposition over in the House that we worked with in terms of what the language meant, what was prohibited and what wasn't. Good conversations came in of that, and we amended the bill, and the one in front of you is in agreement with those, and that we don't have any opposition that I'm aware of that has been brought to my attention. And happy to have any conversations related to this bill and answer any questions or concerns. And with that, urge a favorable report.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Puddle on behalf of the Professional Firefighters of Maryland, representing about 12,000 active and retired firefighters and paramedics across the state of Maryland. We are here in support of House Bill 1381 that would provide the prohibition on burning or setting on fire-oriented strand board. There's a lot of scientific information that I provided in my written testimony to this committee. There's several different documents and also a summary sheet to break it down more simplistically. In essence, this is a firefighter health and safety bill. There are still plenty other acceptable fuels that we can burn for firefighter training, including pine excelsior, wooden pallets, straw, hay, and other wood products. We just want to ban the use of oriented strand board, which inherently in and of itself is not dangerous, but when you burn it, it off-gases and absorbs into the firefighters' systems cancer-causing carcinogens. This bill was also recently passed last year in the state of Virginia, and the Maryland General Assembly has always been very generous in being on the forefront of supporting our firefighters and paramedics in this state on health and safety-related issues, and we would ask for a favorable report from the committee and be happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Any questions for the sponsor or the witness? Seeing none, thank you both.
Thank you
for coming to Annapolis. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have a briefing and some quick voting. We will take a 5-minute break. Do not go far while the committee councilors come in, and hopefully by then some of our committee members who are in other committees will have returned. It's